Hello again, everyone. I am Chris Scher, and this is the Sports Weekly for Wednesday, September 15th, 2021. Robert Harding, Justin Ritzel. September 15th, which in my house is kind of a holiday. It's Dan Marino's birthday.
Oh,
And he hits the big,
of course.
He hits the big 6-0 today, too. Think about Dan Marino 60. That blows me away, man. It does. It's also my Uncle Bob's birthday. He lives out in California now. Happy birthday, Uncle Bob. He's older than 60, but still kicking. But yeah, Danny boy turns 60 today. And Robert says our first topic is to talk about what we learned from week one, or the highlight of week one for us. And for me, it was stunning. If you were doing this from an odds standpoint or a sports betting standpoint, underdogs were 12-4. That is crazy. And if the rest of the season is like this, and I wouldn't be betting football this year. It's gonna be a bloodbath. You're gonna lose your house. You're gonna lose everything, man. Your shirt, everything. Don't, seriously, it is crazy. It is absolutely insane how crazy the underdogs were in week one, going 12-4 against the spread, obviously. I mean, not all those underdogs won games, but they did cover the spread. So I think that this shows you that, and plus the way that, week one started with a great game between the Buccaneers and the Cowboys, how it ended with the Ravens and the Raiders. Who saw the Ravens-Raiders game being a great game? But it was just a great week. I don't think the NFL could have asked for a better week one. Most of the games were competitive. Even the Niners-Lions game. I had picked the Niners in the survivor pool, and they were up like 41-10. I'm like, in the bag, game over. And all of a sudden it's like 41-33. What in the wide world of sports is going on here? This is nuts. So yeah, it was a pretty fun week one. Robert, your takeaways from week uno.
Well, I know that we've talked about this on the video around this time of year before, but this is the new preseason, and I think you saw that last week. And Chris, I'm going to steal a little bit of what you talked about, because you mentioned the underdogs winning, and of course some of the surprises that we saw in week one. Obviously the Bills losing, the Packers got creamed. The Bucks had a close call with the Cowboys. There were people thinking that was going to be a blowout, and it didn't end up happening. I think what you're really seeing is a product of what has happened with preseason over the years, and especially this year. Some of these teams did not play their starters a lot or at all, and usually there's a process involved. Maybe the starters get in for a whole half, but they play a little bit in a game or two before that. It was different this year for a lot of teams. A lot of teams rested their starters, or their starters rarely saw preseason time. And I think you're seeing the product of that in the season. There's a little rust to shake off. And, even a team as good as the Chiefs, look at that game against the Browns. The Browns gave them a real fight. Credit to the Browns for coming out. And, the Chiefs did not look good in that first half. Now they bounced back in the second half, kind of pulled out a game, the likes of which we saw last year, where, things were close, but they always seem to win. And so I think that this is really just part of the trend that, it's going to take a few weeks for these teams, the real powers in the NFL, the Bucks, the Chiefs, my Bills, the Packers, to really get up to the level that people expect. And, there might be some hiccups along the way, but I will say this. Remember that the Bucks won the Super Bowl last year. They really struggled out of the gate, but they won when it mattered. And that's really what the season's going to come down to. So again, September, this is the preseason. We're just kind of easing into when, these teams really get up to the level that we expect in October and beyond.
Justin, week one, let me guess, Aaron Rodgers man bun. Going to chop it off, right?
Well, he should, because that's a terrible look. Okay, he looks like, I'm not the first to make this comparison, but he looks like the guy from The Walking Dead, Negan. He looks washed up and gray. Time to cut that hair. He looks like a goon. But no, that was not my takeaway. I'll just say this first. Chris, you said that was a really fun week one. Well, I have not had a more miserable week of football in my lifetime than I just experienced, between the absolutely abysmal performance by my Green Bay Packers, the fact that I lost both of my fantasy matchups, and the fact that I went 1-3 in my 4-team parlay, which cost me some money. So I'm not in a good mood. Thanks for nothing, NFL. Hopefully we'll rebound in week two. But I'm looking at, and it's week one. A lot of overreactions are going to happen. Weird games happen every single year that ultimately don't matter by season's end. But I do think there are two teams in the NFC that I was impressed with that maybe we should take a little more seriously going forward. And I have to start with the team that embarrassed my Packers, which was the Saints. I got to be honest, I wasn't buying the Jameis Winston hype. I'm certainly not thinking he's going to throw for 5 touchdowns every week. I think he's experienced enough where, to an extent, he is what he is. He's going to make bad mistakes at some point this season. Just week one, he happened to play a absolutely terrible defense that doesn't know what it's doing, and he took advantage of that. But he has an ability to throw the ball deep and to strike for big plays that the Saints have been missing for a few years. And I think that offense, it might be a little more mistake prone this season than it has been with Drew Brees, but I think it can be more dynamic and capable of winning high scoring games and striking fast. And, if they fall behind by 2 touchdowns, they're not out of it like they might've been a few years ago. So, and then that defense, I mean, they completely shut out the best offense in football last year. So I think the Saints, I'm not ready to pick them over the Buccaneers in the NFC South, but if you didn't consider them a contender for a wild card spot, which I don't think any of us did, you better start because they've got some talent still. And then the other team, even though they lost on Thursday night, was the Cowboys. Kind of the same idea, like their defense isn't very good. I think that's going to prevent them from being like an 11-win team. But I think you get to January and that offense is so good that they can hang with the high scoring teams. You scored 27, 28 points on a really good Buccaneers defense. I'm going to take you seriously. So I think they're going to win the NFC East relatively easily, especially with Ryan Fitzpatrick getting injured for Washington. And I think they might be able to upset one of these upper echelon teams come January. So those are just two teams that kind of exceeded my expectations week one.
All right, so we'll get to our picks. Quick recap. Last week, yours truly 2-2. I'm the leader. Justin, 1-3. And then, well, let's put it this way. I'm going to quote what he referred himself to in the letter that had our records. Loser, 0-4. Robert, that's pretty bad, man. 0-4. I mean, we've all had bad weeks. It all happens. All have had 0-4 weeks. I guarantee you that I'll have an 0-4 week eventually sometime this season. It does happen. But the nice thing is you got a long way to go long way. We have a long way to go and we've got plenty of games and this will be competitive. I know it will. There's no way you're going to, go 0-4, have weeks like that very often. So.
It happens. What can you do? I went 0-4. Some of those games were near misses. Other games were total misses. So that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
It does. And again, I'm not trying to rub anything in. Okay.
Look, you got a 2-game lead with 17 weeks to go, and then the whole playoffs. I could smoke your ass, the rest of the way. So, I mean, let's be careful here.
So we're going to get to our games. First thing I want to know is Robert picked the games this week, and I'm absolutely stunned. No Dolphins Bills. I can't believe you did not pick that game because traditionally we always pick that game. So, but your choice. You picked the game, so that's fine.
Look at it's week 2. I get what the NFL's trying to do here, but the Bills aren't up to snuff. I watched part of that. I was forced to watch that Dolphins Patriots poop show last week.
Yeah, I saw the tweets. Oh, sure, it's got it into the league or something.
Some schlub in Syracuse makes the decision not to show the Chiefs Browns game here, so we're subjected to that nonsense. And look, I think the Dolphins defense is up to snuff, but boy, that offense, that's a tough proposition, my friend. So I went with different games.
I'm not going to say that the Dolphins lit it up against the Patriots, but then again, who really does? It's kind of, New England has always had a very good defense. That being said, Miami did put 2 touchdowns on the board, and New England only put 1. So yeah, Mac Jones. I mean, look, he was dinking and dunking. Okay, they didn't even throw a pass at Xavier Howard, by the way. Not one pass thrown Xavier Howard's way. Okay, let's see how the rookie does when he throws at the guy that had 10 picks last year. So look, Mac Jones had a good game. I can't deny that, but I think Tua played well too. Maybe the numbers weren't gaudy, but he played enough and got his team a W when it counted. So, all right, so let's get to these games. Our first game, the Rams at Indy. Rams are 4-point favorites. Rams coming off an impressive Sunday night victory against the Bears. The Colts, I don't even know how they did. Who they play last? I don't even remember.
Seattle,
and they got beat pretty big too, didn't they? Yeah. Well, guess what? They're playing another NFC West team. I say the Rams go 2-0. I think they cover the -4. This team's defense is what's going to get them to the into the playoffs and possibly to the Super Bowl. Indy, Carson Wentz doesn't scare me. The Colts are banged up. I don't think they're going to play that well at home to begin with. I like the Rams -4 against the Colts. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I thought, I agree with what Rich said when he talked about a couple of the teams that impressed him in the NFC. The Rams in that mix. I thought Matt Stafford really impressed in his debut with the Rams. I think that there were a lot of questions about how he would fit in with this Sean McVay offense, and he really showed out on a big stage too. Sunday Night Football. He showed that he's gonna thrive in this offense. I think they've got a contender on their hands there in LA. But I'm taking the Rams here. The Colts didn't show me a lot in week 1. Carson Wentz a little iffy at quarterback. I think it's going to take him some time to get adjusted. To be with a team that actually wants him. And then the way that Seattle offense played, they had a pretty good showing against that Colts defense, which was a pretty stout unit last year. So I'm going to ride the team that is looking pretty good, to start the season here. So I too will go with the Rams.
Justin?
I can't possibly pick the Colts after they lost by 12 to the Seahawks. I think the Rams are just a flat out better team than the Seahawks. So logically, I'm going to have to pick the Rams. I will say with Matt Stafford, he is the ultimate litmus test on how much a situation impacts a quarterback. I think people, and I've said this before, I think people really, I don't know. Matt Stafford, I don't think was in as bad of a situation in Detroit as people make it out to be. I know he's being positioned as this he's finally free and he's playing with a competent franchise, blah, 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 with the Rams, whatever. He had Calvin Johnson to throw to, so I have a hard time making too many excuses for that guy. He looked fine. He looked good. I don't want to say fine. He looked good Sunday night. But let's have some context here. It was against the Chicago Bears, who I think are a sleeper to be one of the worst teams in football this year. Their defense is a shell of what it used to be. They got Andy Dalton throwing the ball around. They're bringing in Justin Fields for 5 plays. That franchise doesn't know what the hell it's doing. Maybe it wasn't all Mitch Trubisky, but listen, the Rams are a good team. There's no doubt about that. They're going to be in the mix in the NFC, and I'm not too impressed with the Colts. So this is pretty easy for me. I'll take the Rams.
All right, our next game, the Tennessee Titans at the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle, 5.5-point favorite. Boy, the Titans have turned into a soap opera all of a sudden. I mean, they had a horrible loss last week. There was chatter about Julio Jones getting called out by Mike Brady.
Julio.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
Julio?
Soft J.
You know why? Okay, I'm going to tell you why I said that. I'm going to tell you why. My grandfather's name was Julius, okay? But people called him Julio. So when I see, I say Julio, that's because my grandfather. So, okay. Julio Jones, sorry. Anyways, the Titans are going nowhere, unfortunately. Although I thought they were going to win their division. They probably still will win their division with a 9-8 record. But come on, we all know how tough a place Seattle is to play. The Seahawks, as we just discussed, look great against Indy. They're home, 5.5-point favorite. All they got to do is win by a touchdown. I like Seattle to cover. No problems. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, he likes to call himself Mr. Unlimited, but Russell Wilson truly is Mr. September because that's about the only month of the year that he plays well. And he showed that week 1, basically had a perfect performance against the Colts. I think 18-23, he threw for 250 yards, 4 touchdowns. Okay, hey, great job, Russell Wilson. I'm sure he'll continue that for another 3 weeks before he falls off a cliff. The Titans, let's call for what it is. They look like a disaster week 1. The Cardinals they got some talent, but you shouldn't get blown out by them to the extent that they did, because the Titans have a lot of talent on offense too. A.J. Brown, Julio, Derrick Henry. I mean, come on, there's no reason that team should lose as badly as they did. I don't like the Seahawks defense. I think even though they're home, 5.5 points is a lot against a Titans team that I think can score. So I don't want to say the Titans will win this outright, but I will pick them to keep it within 5.5. So I'll go Titans.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, this is a tough one because you'd like to think that Tennessee, after that disaster last week, will bounce back. But I am nervous about this offense. They lost their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, I think his name is, who went to Atlanta. He's the head coach there now. And so, it's adjusting to, a new offense here. And I think that might be playing a little factor here, to my point earlier, there's a bit of a warming up period here for teams, I think, with, early in the season. And so, I think we're going to see that with the Titans, a team that really, they've got talent. They've got a solid defense there. Obviously, a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. But I think Seattle at home, the fans will be back. Russell Wilson, to Justin's point, is Mr. September. I don't think it'll be as bad of a performance for Tennessee as it was last week, but I think Seattle will keep the streak going of NFC West teams roughing up Tennessee. I'm taking them to win and cover in this one.
All right. Our next game, the Dallas Cowboys at the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers are 3-point favorites. I look at a couple things here. You guys alluded to it. The Cowboys look pretty good week 1, even though they lost that game to Tampa Bay. Now they have 10 days rest. Okay. And they're well rested. They played very well. The Chargers are a good team, no doubt about that. But something, 3 points, not a huge number. And then the other thing is, how many Cowboys fans are going to be at SoFi Stadium on Sunday? My hunch is there's going to be more Cowboys fans there than Chargers fans. And I think it's going to be a home field advantage for the Cowboys. Cowboys are in a must-win position now, losing their opening game. They've got to win. I like them to win the game outright and cover, and I'm sorry, obviously win outright and cover against the Chargers -3. Go ahead, John. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, after that week 1 performance, I'm pretty high on the Cowboys now. I mean, how can't you be? They go in, everybody thought that the Buccaneers were going to blow them out. No respect for this team, no respect for Dak, and they really should have won that game. I think certainly Tom Brady pulled off his magic, but the Cowboys had their opportunities in that one. And, I think the Chargers certainly aren't as good as the Buccaneers. I thought they performed okay against the Washington football team, but that game was, fairly close last week. I'm going to go with the Cowboys in this one. I think Dak can repeat his performance from last week, and that'll really be the difference in this one. I think that bum Florio said that there's no way that Dak can throw that much in a game. It's like, hey, Mike, look around the league, there's quarterbacks throwing 50 times a game all the time, I get that your boy Kirk Cousins up there can't handle it, but the rest of the league can. Okay. So yeah, I'm going with Dak and the Cowboys in this
one. Justin, your pick.
Well, I know I just pumped the Cowboys tires earlier in the video, but you guys know I can't pick against my AFC team, the Chargers. Listen, yes, they only beat Washington 20-16. Okay, on the surface, that doesn't look like too impressive of a win, but I think that game wasn't as close as the score indicates. I mean, the Chargers offense put up over 400 yards against a really good Washington defense. They went 14 of 19 on third down, which is insane. And they held the ball for 36 out of the 60 minutes. So I think a really solid performance by the Chargers offense that just didn't result in a lot of points. But I'm thinking like, hey, if that's what they can do against a solid Washington defense, what are they going to do against this Civ Cowboys defense? I grant you it's probably going to be like a Cowboys home game because the Chargers don't really have a fan base, but I don't think that really matters. I think we overrate home field in general. I mean, you point out the underdogs or whatever that lost last week. I've seen too many times where these supposed national teams go to LA or they go to Florida and it's going to be half the crowd's going to be in favor of the away team. And then the home team wins anyway. I just don't think it really matters that much. So whatever, I'll take the Chargers to win by a touchdown. I don't mind the 3 points.
All right. Our last game, the Kansas City Chiefs are a 3-point favorite on the road at Baltimore. Kansas City coming off a nice win against Cleveland, having to come back. Baltimore coming off that crazy loss on Monday night to the Raiders. And this is, I think, the game where Ravens fans realize that all those injuries they've had at the running back position and some of the other are going to catch up to them. Look, Lamar Jackson, dynamic player, no doubt about it. But, he coughed up the ball twice on Monday night. And the Ravens defense, I mean, that was really, really bad. Chiefs, I mean, like I said, I think you could say maybe this is the team that didn't really go all out in preseason, decided to rest people. So the first game was kind of like their preseason game in a way. But now I think they go on the road, and I think they cover the -3. They win outright, obviously, and they cover -3 against the Ravens. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, I refer back to the recent history between these two teams. They've played each of the last 2 years. Coincidentally, both of those were week 3 games. This time it's week 2. So NFL loves pitting these two teams against each other early in the season, but the Chiefs won both of those games. They won both of them handily. I mean, go back to last year. I think they played on a Monday night game. Chiefs won by 2 touchdowns in Baltimore. I go back to 2 years ago. They played in Kansas City. It was a close game in terms of the final score. I think it was 33-28, but the Chiefs were up 23-7 at halftime. That was more or less a backdoor cover by the Ravens. They were not in that game. So, and then I think Lamar Jackson, after last year when they lost to the Chiefs, he came out and said, like, yeah, this team is our kryptonite. So how can I have any confidence that the Ravens are going to turn this around and cover what's really a very small spread, 3 points? Why should I pick them? And that's without even considering the stuff you just said, Chris, about the injuries, and they just came off a loss week 1. I don't see any way the Chiefs lose this game, which of course means that they'll probably lose it because of my track record so far this year.
And don't forget the short week playing on Monday night. I always like to throw that in. You know how much Robert loves when I throw that cliche out. Go ahead, Robert.
Tourism. Very nice. Very nice. With the history here, I think what the odds makers were doing here is to kind of respond to what happened with Kansas City last year, in that they were often favorites, heavy favorites, and they didn't cover. They would win those games, but didn't cover. So now you kind of lowball it, I think, here and say, 3-point favorite, pretty easy cover for the Chiefs, I think. With Baltimore, they came into this season as one of those teams being looked at as, okay, maybe this team can can run with the Chiefs, but the loss of Marcus Peters, I think, is huge on the outside. That's a corner. Yeah, they have Marlon Humphrey, but to have a number 2 corner like Marcus Peters on your team is pretty good to have, and they lost him. And I think what you saw the other night against the Raiders, Darren Waller lit up that Ravens defense, and I think Travis Kelce will have a similar performance. As a Travis Kelce fantasy owner, I sure hope so. But I think the Ravens here again. Lamar Jackson. They should have won that game on Monday night. I think they basically threw it away, and certainly they played pretty well throughout most of that game. But I think the defense didn't hold up. Obviously, Lamar Jackson made a couple of mistakes, but the Chiefs are a different story. I think the Chiefs will put this defense to an even harder test. I think they will win and cover in this one. I think Baltimore will keep it interesting. Obviously, Jackson's a great player. They seem to have a solid offense going there now. Mark Andrews at tight end. They've always had kind of a stable of running backs, that get the job done, when needed. But Jackson's really their lead rusher. But I mean, the Chiefs just have too many weapons, and that defense is pretty good too. So I like them on the road.
All right. So there's our picks. Before we get going, I think it'd be remiss if we didn't briefly talk about the Manning brothers from Monday night's game. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. But that being said, there are some things that ESPN
Here we go.
needs to do. Number one, we don't need special guests every quarter. Okay, it takes away from the game. We don't need Charles Bart. I love Charles Barkley, by the way. I thought he's great, but we don't need him in the first quarter. Okay, we don't need Travis Kelce in the third quarter. We don't need Ray Lewis in the second quarter, and we don't need Russell Wilson in the fourth quarter. Okay, if you want to have a guest on at halftime, okay, because remember, ESPN actually showed their regular halftime during this game. To me, have the Manning brothers interview somebody, have their guests on at halftime when it doesn't take away from the game. That's because there's just too many people talking. They're talking over each other. And they can't get a word in edgewise, and it takes away from the broadcast. The two brothers are good enough. Second thing, never ever go away from the Manning brothers in the little boxes on the side of the screen. We don't need to see Peyton Manning trying to put a helmet on as a large part of your TV screen when there's a play going on. Okay, we don't want shtick. This isn't Saturday Night Live. Okay, we know Peyton can host Saturday Night Live. He did it pretty darn well back in the day. We don't need that. So keep the big screen on the game the whole time. Keep Peyton and Eli on little screens on the side there. Don't give a shtick. Keep the voices to a minimum, just the two of these guys. And I think this will be even better next week, but we'll see what happens. Go ahead, guys. You can wrap it up here.
Oh, I'll lead things off here. If you have that many complaints about it, watch the other broadcast, for God's sake. I mean, listen to this guy whine about, I enjoyed it, then rattle off every single aspect of the show that you hated it, which is the whole point of this alternate broadcast.
The Manning cast, not the Manning and Friends cast.
Okay. Well, all right. Here's what I'll say. I loved it, and I did like them incorporating the guests. I thought Russell Wilson was a great guest there because, certainly, he played quarterback. And so, when they were talking about down the stretch there, and I went back and watched it, the fourth quarter and overtime, late in the fourth quarter and overtime, they were kind of batting ideas off each other about what the play was going to be. I thought that was, fascinating stuff. I thought he made a great guess, but I enjoyed it because I think that, Chris, I know that, you come from an age where, you listen to the games on the radio. So you just want to hear what the plays are. You want to see what the plays are. I get it. I certainly know where you're coming from, but the whole point of these is to add a different dimension of the game. We don't need to see every play necessarily. That's what replay's for. If you're watching this, you're watching this for the Mannings. And so, yes, you're going to see most of the game, but you're there for their expertise. You're there for, obviously, their personalities and everything. So, look, I get what you're saying. I think, some of it maybe Warren, maybe you do kind of slow down on how many guests you have. Maybe you don't need one every quarter, but I think that you're kind of missing the whole point of the thing if you're rattling off all this stuff and you just want to see the play. I mean, there is a broadcast for that. So the whole point of this is to really highlight the Manning's expertise, and that's what you're watching for. You're not, and I think that this kind of broadcast really appeals to people who aren't fans of the teams playing. I mean, if you're not a fan of the Ravens and Raiders, do you really want to listen to Steve Levy all night? No, and you don't need to see every play. So this I thought was a great alternative. It's something that, as long as, even if the Bills are playing on Monday Night Football and the Mannings are doing it, I'd probably watch anyway. I think it's great. I think that they add a dimension to the game that, we don't see. And the NFL, there's a lot of monotony in these broadcasts. I thought it was great to have them add a little entertainment, sure, but their expertise is what set them apart. You don't have that. Even Tony Romo doesn't have this. That's hard for me to say about even Eli, who shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, but Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Justin, anything you want to throw out there?
Well, I so badly wanted to respond to you on Monday when I saw you send out this tweet with your criticisms that you just outlined a minute ago, but I figured that we would touch on this today, so I held back. No need to get in a pissing match over Twitter. But yes, I agree with Robert. Chris, it sounds like what you want is the same thing that ESPN has wanted for several years, which is they wanted Peyton Manning on a traditional ESPN Monday Night Football broadcast. But Peyton Manning is not on the broadcast because he doesn't want to do that. If he's going to be involved, and he's shown this with his details show that he does for ESPN Plus, but he doesn't want to do a conventional broadcast. He wants to sit there and shoot the shit with Eli or whoever else wants to come on. And that's what appeals to him, and that's what got him on board. You say it's shtick. Yeah, again, like Robert said, that's the point of the show. Now, do I agree? Do we need the guests that they chose to bring on? I mean, I don't need to hear from Ray Lewis. I don't give two hoots what Ray Lewis has to say about anything. Russell Wilson, I didn't watch that part where he came on. Typically, he's not a very interesting guy. So again, I'm not sure why they're bringing Russell Wilson in to talk about stuff. But I think there are certainly times to bring on guests. But that's the one thing I will agree with you on is we don't need to be recruiting 4 guys per broadcast. Hey, maybe that was just something they're trying out for week 1, and then future weeks they'll dial it back and they'll have 1 or 2 guests. I don't know. We got to wait and see how they play this thing, how they respond to whatever critiques there may be. We'll see. I will say next week, my Packers are on the Monday night broadcast. And yes, as Robert said, I am a fan of one of the teams. So I want a more traditional broadcast. I will be watching the Steve Levy, Louis Riddick, and then the greasy bum.
Greasy.
Yeah, I'll be watching him. All greasies. They're all bums. You know that, Chris. I'll be watching that broadcast. But yeah, when there's highlights after the game of, hey, here's the most interesting thing Peyton and Eli said about some terrible pass that Jared Goff threw, or here's this great read that Aaron Rodgers made. I'm hoping that's the way the game plays out. But yeah, that's the time I will want to listen to their commentary. But hey, I think this is a good thing for Monday Night Football. We'll see where it goes, but come on with those criticisms,
Well, look, for the record, I liked it. I will watch it again, but like anything else, it wasn't perfect. And I think they can do some tweaking, and that's my tweaks. And you want to call it criticism, you can call it criticism, but to me, it's just some things that they can do to improve it. So
I would love to build a time machine and place Chris beside Michelangelo as he's painting the Sistine Chapel, and just here's his criticism of his paint stroke right here, and you could have done this a little better here. This is going to be considered a masterpiece in hundreds of years, but the sheer expertise is what you need right now, Michelangelo.
Okay, all right, guys, this was fun. Boy, I love the NFL segments we do. These are so much fun. So anyways, folks, we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next week with more picks.